As South Africa, one of the themes we have been discussing is their exports, which I think for the South African agricultural sector is at the core of everything that we do. Because the reality is we already export about half of what we produce. And there's a lot that the farmers are still producing out there. A lot of trees have been planted, and all of that product will be looking to export markets. And we know that opening up markets takes a long time. Under the normal circumstances, it could take you about 10 to 5 years to 15 years. It's a long process that you have to undergo. But of course, we've seen now under the new era where the US president has put a lot of pressure that deals can come up in a space of a few days. But the key thing that in South Africa we have to think about is not only identifying the areas that we know that they are growing and they have an exciting population in terms of the people that may demand some of these products. Think about China, a lot of people there, India, the Middle East, and all of these regions. They are all exciting. I agree with that. And South Africa already exports some products in these countries. And we can increase the products and our capacity and our participation in some of these markets. But the one conversation we haven't had, and I think we must think about this, you, the exporters, the growers, agribusinesses, and those that are sitting in government, is whether we have enough capacity as a country to negotiate with as many countries as we can. We are probably used on having a thin and a focused team at the DTIC, which is the authoritative department that deals with our trade issues, along assisted with DIRCO, that's the Department of International Relations and Cooperation. But this time around, if we are entering this new era where there's both a need to engage with the US, the existing markets that we already have, but at the same time, scanning the world to see where else should we be sending our products to. We have to ensure that we have enough people to do that. And secondly, they are supported by technical insights that would enable them to carry their work effectively. And I think that's the conversation that the agribusinesses, the farmers, many stakeholders in South Africa, the business community should be having, and also assessing if there must be ways at which they can enhance the efforts that the DTIC and the others are already doing. And hey, this is by no means a criticism and saying, no, people aren't doing their job. People are doing excellent jobs. I mean, look at us in the South African agricultural sector. In year 2000, we were exporting around $2 billion worth of agricultural products. 2024, we were just under $14 billion. We've opened a number of markets over the years, and we wouldn't have opened those markets without the assistance of the South African government, which means that for a period, we're able to open as many export markets as we can. But this time around, the world has changed. I mean, you read every day that the EU is about to sign a deal with South America. You read about another deal of the UK and India. Things are happening in a fast pace. And at the same time, we have to be engaging with the US because we want to retain the market access that we have in the US at a preferential and a better tariffs that we could get in that. And I think to do all of these things at the same time, that will require a lot of capacity. And I think that's something that South Africa should actually be focusing and devoting resources on. Because for us in agriculture, trade is everything. Without accessing as many export markets as we cannot grow at the pace that we want to grow and expand the production now across all of the regions of South Africa at a level that we want, because ultimately much of what we will be producing will have to go to the export markets. And I think the way we will be engaging with the world this time around has changed from the early 2000s and the early 1990s, where we were looking at the world and people were looking at South Africa and saying, hey, South Africa, you've been closed for a certain period. We are willing to extend a bit of generosity to you. This time around, other countries are also looking to diversify, which means they may be looking at South Africa as a market, which is why we need to have a strong technical ability to support those that are sitting on as authorities representing us in all of these spaces on making the choices and the trade-offs that are necessary. And I think the responsibility for that lies on everyone. You may not necessarily be the one that is engaging with the government, but you can fund research that will be there. And by the way, I'm not pitching for research. Hey, I'm employed, I have a job. But you can fund the academics and many people that are engaged in research that will enable South Africans to think more strategically about where we should be sending our products as a country, because this is an important area. And that's the story of trade. And many of you who have followed this channel and some of the stuff that we have been writing, you know that we thought about what 2025 would look like in South African agriculture. We are now 7 months down in this year, and you're probably thinking, hey, are you still as optimistic as you were saying, or you were just talking nonsense at the start of the year? I wasn't talking nonsense. I'm still very optimistic. And yes, I know we have experienced many challenges, and those have been costly, by the way, because if you talk to our friends in the livestock industry, it's been brutal. The foot and mouth disease, we thought that last year we were getting a handle of it as a country. We had cases in the Eastern Cape, but we thought that we were marching towards the right direction. And also, if we were to look at the beef exports last year, they were picking up after they have dipped in the previous years. Because when we have these foot and mouth diseases, we get to be closed off in certain export markets. Closed off not only in the case of beef, sometimes people fear even on their sheep, wool, and all of the other stock, and say, we no longer want a bit of your lamb or mutton or your wool for a certain period because we fear about all of these diseases. So it creates a certain reputation. And we thought we were getting out of that. And of course, then we were hit by some of these diseases. And I think South Africa is still in that space. There's a lot of good work that is being done by many organizations, collaborating with government and thinking about how do we strengthen our animal health capability as a country. And I think that conversation of strengthening the animal health capability should go along with strengthening the plant health side, because the whole story of the exports that I've just talked about cannot happen without a strong and a robust biosecurity, which is why many South Africans consistently talk about the biosecurity, because it is a prerequisite for you to be able to have a thriving agricultural sector. And I think the investment in that part, I mean, the South African government has been out there and saying, we will invest in this. And I think as the people that are in the sector and the people of South Africa in general, we have then to be saying, okay, fine, you want to invest? Let's start with the vaccine manufacturing. Let's put capabilities in place. And this time around, not only the government entities that must produce this, lean on the private sector capabilities as well. Bring in the private sector to be able to produce so that in times of crisis, we have a range of players that can actually bring the product into market and assist the importance and the growth of the sector. And that's the approach that we need to take also on plant health. Because just because now we are struggling with animal health issues, let's not sit back and think that there will nothing that will happen on plant health. We have to have our antennas up and be watching some of these things. So that's the sector that I would say in South Africa this time around has taken a knock. And of course, the livestock and the poultry industry are so important. They account for roughly half of our farming economy. So there are problems there. But there's also other areas that are fairly upbeat. I mean, think about the fruit industry. In terms of the output has been excellent. I mean, we've been seeing the exports going out. The logistics, thanks to you, Transnet and the others, the ports seem to be working fairly well. And I think now, whatever Transnet and the partnerships that we are making with the sector are underway, they have to continue. Because from what I am reading and looking at the data, so far this year, the performance has been great. And I think when there are a bit of improvement, we need to acknowledge the good news. And I was happy to see some of the South African media covering some of the improvements at the ports that have happened, specifically in agriculture. I'm not saying all the issues at the ports are fixed. No, I'm saying, and as far as agriculture, so far, we've experienced less problems relative to the previous years. And if then that work continues, because once you have the export markets, you've dealt with the biosecurity, you also need ports that are functioning. And don't forget those municipalities. You see, these roads issue that we have talked about, the municipalities we need to put consistent pressure on that. They need to maintain the roads, improve in some of the areas, because ultimately that is key into growing our South African agricultural sector. The other important part or subsector of this of agriculture that has done well, I mean, the grain and the oilseeds, we've talked about this. They've had an excellent year so far when you're looking at the output. And yes, with quality issues, especially on white maize. You look away from that, you think about the sugarcane industry, the numbers are looking as robust, as excellent as well in the sugarcane industry, which supports, again, this view of growth in the sector. So if you balance all of those things and you ask me to say, hey, are you still as optimistic as in the start of this year? I'll say, yeah, I'm still optimistic. But the only thing that I would tell you is that the growth of the South African agricultural sector this year will be uneven. We are looking at an uneven recovery in this sector. Livestock will face some pressures in the fruit. The key thing is the export markets and the dynamics of the US. But in terms of the output, we're looking fairly well. In the grain industry, a bit of quality, especially in white maize, but overall, the volume's decent. Sugarcane, things looking fairly well. In vegetables, yes, there were disruptions because of heavy rains here and there, but overall, our vegetable harvest in a number of areas is looking fairly well. They may be delayed on when they deliver it, as you saw on food price inflation for June, that the vegetable prices skyrocketed a little bit relative to other products. Part and parcel of that is this volume issue in various fresh produce markets, which is related to when the harvest actually gets to be delivered. So don't say, hey, you said this growth, there would be growth in 2025. Where's this growth? Where's this growth? No. It's because of these dynamics that I've just spelled out. And hey, folks, thank you so much for always watching the show. And I hope that you can share the link, subscribe to our channel, and let's keep this going. Thank you for watching.